Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been an ongoing franchise since 1998 and has evolved from a dark manga about a lonely teenage boy who likes board games to one of the most successful trading card games ever released. One of the most diverse ways to enjoy this franchise, however, comes in the form of video games, which have varied mechanics, stories, and way to ogle cool monster designs. So let's take a walk through different kinds of games that exist throughout Yu-Gi-Oh's 20-year history, going from 1998 all the way through to 2021. And let's see exactly how we got here. The Falsebound Kingdom came out on December 5th, 2002 in Japan, and came stateside on November 4th, 2003, just in time to satiate the dire need for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Goodness during the holiday season. It's worth noting that at this point in the US, the fervor for Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards and actual tournament play was still very much occurring. Taking much inspiration from other strategy RPG games like Ogre Battle, this game seeks to expand the possible genres that Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters can fit into. I really wish there was still a drive to do this for the IP, especially with how much lore is associated with all the cards nowadays. Could you imagine an RPG about like Albaz lore or something like that? Good stuff. Anyway, this game is just like the other non-standard Yu-Gi-Oh! Games and has a real love-or-hate relationship to it. It didn't review particularly well either, garnering a cumulative critic Metascore review of a whopping 44, where the outlet with the highest review score there, Nintendojo, could only muster a fans of the genre will like this, which is really faint praise among reviewers. VG charts, which has come a long way over the years, by the way, I don't need any of you olds jumping down my throat about it, purports that the game sold just over 700,000 units while on shelves, with the majority of the reported sales coming from North America. So what exactly is this game like? And what do I feel about it personally? Well, let's get our journey going with how we always began, the sweet free cardboard inside. As prescribed, every purchase of a new copy of this game came with 3 promotional cards, which for the United States were Zoa, Metal Zoa, and Goblin Fan. These would be the only printings of these cards for a little while, which gave them a bit of a price tag on the secondary market. European countries would receive a different set of promos that included Fairy King Truesdale, Kinetic Soldier, and Slate Warrior. Sound familiar? And, strangely, Spanish markets would receive a promo set of Sinister Serpent, Harpy's Feather Duster, and Slate Warrior. Interestingly, for the life of me, I cannot verify what the Japanese promos for this game were, if there even were any. Which, if this was the one game that didn't have promos for Japan, that would be very funny. The game is divided into 2 main stories, one where you play as Yugi and one where you play as Kaiba, who have both been trapped inside a new virtual reality Duel Monsters game that takes place in a high fantasy setting. When it becomes clear you've been isekai'd, the characters begin to play along with the story of the game, become leaders of forces working for either the Rebellion in Yugi's story or for the Empire in Kaiba's. Although Kaiba does eventually betray the Empire, and at some point Yugi must fight his friends who have been brain bamboozled, because that's what this game needed, was further extension of mission encounters. This has all been orchestrated by a game designer named Scott Irvine, who wants to control all 3 god cards. At the end, you must defeat Scott at his own game, and then, oh, who's this? Back for one more round, it is Dark Knight himself. Dark Knight is armed with an opposing god card, so for Yugi, he has Obelisk the Tormentor, and for Kaiba, he has Slifer the Sky Dragon. When you beat one of the stories for the first time, you can take all of your monsters into the playthrough of the other characters, where they make all the monsters a higher level, and at the end, you must fight Nightmare, who has the opposing god card at level 99. Oh my god, this game. After defeating both of these campaigns, you are rewarded with a 3rd and final campaign where you play as Joey. Ultimately, you simulate several large-scale, supposedly, battles in which your characters take over the fortresses of the enemy to claim land for your war campaign until getting to the endgame sequence with Mr. Irvine. The story appears more complex than it is, disguising itself with little mid-session events that turn the tide toward or against your favor and inventing the silliest names for the areas and characters, A nice detail is that they reference Haishin's brief rule in Forbidden Memories in the opening cutscene of the virtual reality game you're warped into, which is called Kingdom. Oh yeah, Scott, that name will have it flying right off the shelves. Kingdom. But yeah, that's basically the story for this final chapter of the true Duel Monsters verse, which seems appropriately strange considering this series' ambitious beginnings on the PlayStation. Now, I'm aware that I said there would be a gameplay video for this game at the end of the Sacred Cards review, but buddy, I gotta tell ya, this game is no fun to watch. Before I tell you a bit about the mechanics and how they work, I need to express just how monotonous this game is to look at from an observer's perspective. The footage you've seen all throughout is sprinkled with some of the Let's Play style videos I had recorded for this game, but upon reviewing them in an edit, I realized just how little there is in the moment-to-moment gameplay. It's a lot like other strategy games at the time, but the visuals were so muddy even back then. And there were a number of reused assets for portraits, and the new portraits that were drawn give some real how-to-draw anime vibes. Honestly, I'm sure it was rendered for this game specifically, but if you told me that the cut-ins from the opening cutscene bit with Haishin were just unused from Forbidden Memories, I think I might believe you, because they're just too high quality for the rest of the new stuff offered in this game. Now, before I get into the weeds of what grinds my gears specifically, let's take a look at how the game actually works. This game is a mixture of real-time strategy and RPG instance battles. Each story character controls a force of drooling monsters that can level up after each encounter with an enemy force, with the ultimate goal of overtaking the opposing general's fortress. This is accomplished by taking over smaller towns for more advantageous positions and better resources, thus cutting off your foes from those same resources. Does this sound like a great idea? You betcha. Is it everything you're hoping for? Well, let's take a bit to explain what this looks like. As Yugi or Kaiba, you have a small force of team captains. Each of these can command a monster unit, and each unit is comprised of 3 monsters, with one being designated a leader. Each team can become equipped with items picked from the spoils of previous missions, such as potions, which means you start the game with nothing and have no way to get anything, better armaments, and so forth. The monsters can level up by finishing skirmishes with enemy forces, and this increases all of their stats. Some of the human captains, like Tristan, have special skills that make them better at certain field actions like building new structures. That's a lot of discussion about team setup. Now that you know how detailed the team composition can be, let's go over what the field looks like for you. In the field, where the game really happens, you begin at one end of the map and your enemy on another end. Most of the missions past the first couple will have some sort of special condition to winning, or some way to change the tide of battle, such as trying to keep enemy forces at one fortress, because Simon Murin has rigged it to explode. Always knew he was the real hero. By moving your team into an unoccupied fortress, you take it over immediately, and can, after the game tutorializes you about it, build additional structures like a merchant stall for trading or cannons for firing on combatants from afar. I will emphasize occasionally. If you enter the fortress that is taken over by an enemy, you have to clear out all the forces that are inside it, each being its own team of 3 weirdos. Once a fortress is taken over, your forces will retreat to there if they are defeated, so claiming one's closer to the arena boss's fortress is obviously key to success in a mission. When you do engage with an enemy force, it becomes a 3-on-3 skirmish, in which each of the monsters take turns, making combat actions such as attacking, guarding, or using an item. I said such as, but that's actually all the options. There's only one more, which is running. But why would I ever run? I'm no coward. The amount of actions a monster can take is determined by their speed and star level. 1 star is 1 action. So speedier and higher level creatures will likely get to take several more actions than an ordinary monster with only a few star points. Fights are relatively straightforward early on, but become far more annoying as enemies begin to use items and take advantage of types of attacks in monster matchups. Overall, there's a lot that just doesn't feel good from a modern perspective. I certainly had some nostalgia for this game from watching my friends play it, but strategy has also typically not always gelled well with me, and especially when I was much younger, so take all of this with a grain of salt, I suppose. The enemy forces level up with a pretty steady curve, so making sure you're always bringing everyone you can and the right monsters for the job is critical to not losing 30 minutes of progress from a couple bad decisions. I suppose this is the reality, though, for people who really like Civ 5, so maybe it's not all so doom and gloom. This game's, different, in a way I wish more of these games were. It's a bold concept and one that really feels like it should be a surefire success from theory alone. But the flatness of the battles and generally molasses feeling of the traversing and fighting, it all begins to wear on my patience much quicker than it would in something like Duelist of the Roses. Also, I've been playing music this whole time in the video, and I bet you maybe wondered to yourself why I'm reusing music in some places. Plot twist, I'm not. This game reuses several Duelist of the Roses tracks, and the music that is original is generally terrible. It's such a shame. One of the composers returned to make the score for this game as well, but it's just not inspired as previous entries. This whole game really feels like people may have been experiencing burnout on this particular series, and I certainly wouldn't blame them. All of these were internal Konami development employees, so I'm sure they were splitting a lot of responsibilities and trying to reinvent the wheel for this series one more time had to be a big ask. I'm glad I took the time to look this game back over, as it's the sole Yu-Gi-Oh game that you can find for the Nintendo GameCube, and had a very unique concept among the various spin-off titles. It just wasn't quite as fleshed out, at least to me, as Duelist of the Roses. Our next game is very special in a lot of people's hearts, and there's even been some comments looking forward to, or at least anticipating, when the series would cover the one, the only, Reshef of Destruction. I'll see you in the next one.